Picture this. A quiet suburban street, manicured lawns so perfect they look like they've been photoshopped by God himself. Birds chirping, sprinklers hissing, and somewhere, a Karen sharpening her sense of entitlement like it's a samurai blade. Now enter Alex, robotics researcher, genius, and apparently the only person on this street who believes science should exist. His pride and joy? A sleek, million-dollar prototype named Bolt, the SRU-7 service robot. Think WALL-E meets Elon Musk's ambition and MIT's caffeine budget. Bolt isn't some Roomba on steroids. This thing is cutting-edge tech, collecting environmental data, mapping particulates, and doing sciencey stuff that would make NASA take notes. It's the kind of machine that represents progress, innovation, and hope for humanity. Unfortunately, progress is the mortal enemy of one species, the HOA Karen. Karen Henderson, HOA president, self-proclaimed guardian of neighborhood aesthetics and full-time destroyer of joy, had decided Bolt was an unauthorized autonomous contrivance, which in normal person language means a robot she didn't understand and therefore hated. Alex was back at his desk, sipping cold coffee, watching Bolt's feed in real time, his robot rolling peacefully down Primrose Lane, minding its own binary business. The telemetry? Perfect. The data? Flowing. The vibes? Immaculate. Until suddenly, there she was. Karen appeared on the screen like a glitch in the simulation, power walking armed with what looked suspiciously like a sledgehammer. That's right, not a broom, not a complaint form, an actual weapon of blunt suburban destruction. Now, if you're wondering, wait, who just carries a sledgehammer around in broad daylight? The answer is someone who alphabetizes her spice rack and sees technology as witchcraft. Alex froze. No, she wouldn't do that. But Karen would. Before he could even shout through the mic, Karen swung. Crunch. Bolt's optical sensors shattered. Sparks flew like the 4th of July met a Best Buy clearance sale. The telemetry screen went red. The feed died. Silence. Just one line from Alex's monitor gloaming in digital despair: system failure. In that single swing, Karen didn't just destroy a robot, she obliterated $1.2 million worth of federally funded research and years of progress. Bolt wasn't just metal, it was data, innovation, and probably a Nobel Prize waiting to happen. And Karen, she thought she just handled a community violation. Alex sprinted out the door like a man possessed, shoes half-tied, rage fully loaded. 3 blocks later, he found her, standing triumphantly over Bolt's chassis, sledgehammer on her shoulder like Thor's petty cousin. She looked proud, victorious, like she'd saved the cul-de-sac from an alien invasion led by AI. Alex could barely speak. Karen, you just destroyed university property. That's a research prototype. Karen snorted. It was trespassing. HOA bylaws prohibit autonomous wheeled contraptions without prior consent. Also, it scared Fifi. Fifi, by the way, is a teacup poodle, a dog so tiny it could fit in a tissue box. Alex stared, blinking through a combination of rage, grief, and disbelief. This wasn't a violation of community decorum. This was vandalism on a federal level. And here's the thing about scientific institutions. They might move slowly, but when you destroy a $1 million robot, they move faster than lightning wearing a law degree. Because 2 minutes later, the real show began. Karen thought she'd won, but the universe and the university had other plans. Because while she was basking in HOA glory, something black and sleek was already turning down Primrose Lane. Let's just say it wasn't Amazon Prime.
2 minutes, that's all it took. 120 seconds after Karen Henderson's suburban showdown with technology, the sound of justice began to hum down Primrose Lane. It started subtle, an unfamiliar engine growl that didn't belong to a Prius or a leaf blower. Then, from around the corner came a sleek black sedan, the kind that whispers, "We don't honk, we litigate." Karen was still basking in her delusional victory speech, lecturing Alex about community values and unauthorized contraptions, when the sedan glided to a stop. The doors opened in perfect legal synchronization, and out stepped two people who looked like they'd been summoned from a parallel universe where every argument ends with, "You've been served." Enter Mr. Marcus Thorne and Ms. Eleanor Albright. University Legal Counsel, dressed sharper than a lawsuit in motion. They didn't walk, they glided, the kind of entrance that makes neighbors pull their curtains and whisper, "Oh, someone's in trouble." "Mrs. Karen Henderson?" Thorne's voice was smooth, polished, like velvet wrapped around a court summons. Karen blinked twice. She looked from Alex to the lawyers, back to the sledgehammer in her hand, then down at Bolt's smoldering corpse. "Excuse me? This is private property. This is an HOA matter." Ms. Albright, cool, collected, and terrifying in a way only a woman who's memorized every clause of federal research law can be, stepped forward. Without a word, she handed Karen a thick stack of paperwork bound with a blue legal ribbon. The kind of paperwork that smells like your life is about to change. "Mrs. Henderson," Albright said crisply, "you are hereby served with a temporary restraining order prohibiting further contact with any university personnel or property. You are also served with a cease and desist notice regarding interference with ongoing federally funded research. And furthermore," and this is where the air got heavy, "this document constitutes notice of intent to pursue civil litigation for the malicious destruction of university research property, SRU-7, valued preliminarily at $1.2 million US. You could almost hear the HOA bylaws shatter in Karen's brain. "Wait, 1.2 million?" she croaked. Thorne smiled politely. "Yes, ma'am, plus legal fees, possibly punitive damages, and of course we'll need to retain the instrument of destruction," he gestured at the sledgehammer, "for evidence." Somewhere in the distance, a lawnmower stopped mid-chop. A child's bubble wand froze in the air. Even Fifi, the poodle, seemed to sense the existential dread of her owner's impending doom. Karen tried to recover. "This is ridiculous. It was trespassing. It didn't have a permit." Thorne raised an eyebrow, the kind that cost $800 an hour. "Mrs. Henderson, the SRU-7 robot was operating under a federally approved environmental study authorized by both the city and the Department of Environmental Sciences. Your bylaws added, do not supersede federal research authorization." Boom. Legal mic drop. Alex stood there in stunned silence, watching the universe realign itself in real time. The woman who just smashed his life's work now stood trembling on her own driveway, gripping a sledgehammer like it might suddenly defend her in court. Ms. Albright, never missing a beat, leaned in and said, "You may wish to secure legal counsel immediately." And just when Karen thought her day couldn't possibly get worse, a police cruiser rolled up. Because of course it did. Apparently, a concerned neighbor had called 911, possibly Karen herself in a moment of reverse victim strategy. The officers stepped out, clearly expecting a noise complaint, and instead found a destroyed robot, two lawyers, and a woman looking like she'd seen her HOA presidency flash before her eyes. Officer Miller surveyed the scene and said what everyone was thinking. What in the Sam Hill happened here? Alex deadpanned, "She destroyed a $1 million research robot with a sledgehammer." The officer blinked. "You want to run that by me again?" That's when the lawyers, professionals to their core, flashed their credentials. "We'll be taking it from here, officers. This is now a federal matter." And just like that, Primrose Lane became ground zero for the most satisfying act of suburban justice in recent history. Karen's jaw was on the ground, but that was just the opening act, because once the lawyers left and the cops taped off the scene, the real fallout began. Her HOA kingdom was about to turn on her faster than a neighborhood Facebook group over lawn ornaments.
If Karen thought she could HOA her way out of $1 million lawsuit, she was about to learn a valuable lesson. Bylaws can't save you from federal law. Because while she was still practicing her "I did it for the safety of the community" speech in front of a mirror, the rest of Sunny Meadows Estates was busy realizing something horrifying. Karen hadn't just smashed a robot. She'd just smashed their wallets. Let's rewind 24 hours. The neighborhood message board, normally a wasteland of complaints about recycling bins and off-color garden gnomes, was on fire. Post after post popped up like popcorn. Did anyone else see the cops at Karen's house? Was that robot blood on the sidewalk? Wait, are we all getting sued? Within minutes, the HOA group chat was pure chaos. Karen tried to regain control of her digital empire. "Attention homeowners, please refrain from spreading misinformation. The robot was an unregistered spy device threatening our community's privacy." Translation: "I destroyed a federal research robot and now I'm Googling how to declare bankruptcy." But the problem with controlling an HOA mob is that you can't, especially when everyone realizes they might be financially liable. The insurance rep, a man named Mr. Periwinkle, yes, really, had already called Treasurer Bob that morning with the enthusiasm of someone delivering a bomb disguised as bad news. "Well, Bob, the policy might not cover deliberate destruction of federally funded university assets, especially not with a sledgehammer." Bob, mild-mannered accountant by day and accidental whistleblower by night, nearly dropped his coffee. "Wait, so we're exposed?" "Significantly," Periwinkle sighed. "You may want to, update your wills." By lunchtime, the HOA board called an emergency meeting. Now, if you've ever been to an HOA meeting, you know they usually involve lukewarm coffee, passive-aggressive muffins, and arguments about fence height. But this was the Godfather, Suburbia edition. Karen strutted in like a general returning from battle, clutching a binder of bylaws so thick it could stop a bullet. She launched into her defense speech before anyone could breathe. "Ladies and gentlemen of the board," she began, her voice trembling with righteous fury, "I did what had to be done. That robot was trespassing. It was mapping our private properties. I was protecting Sunny Meadows Estates." The board stared. Bob coughed. Someone whispered, "She's lost it." Karen, undeterred, slammed her hand on the table and continued. "Bylaw 12, Section A clearly states, no unauthorized surveillance equipment shall be operated within the community limits without written consent of the Architectural Committee. That robot violated our sovereignty." "Sovereignty?" muttered Linda from Lot 14. "Karen, this isn't a country, it's a cul-de-sac." Then Treasurer Bob, pale and trembling, held up a sheet of paper. "Karen, the university's lawyers called. They're suing you personally, and possibly the HOA, for damages exceeding $1.2 million. The silence was so heavy you could have heard Fifi's toenails click from across the room. Karen blinked, clearly not processing. "Well, that's ridiculous. The HOA will cover it." "The HOA won't cover anything. Our insurance doesn't apply to acts of deliberate destruction. They called it a significant 7-figure exposure." Translation: everyone in Sunny Meadows was about to get hit with an emergency levy. Karen's jaw dropped. "You can't do that. I was acting in the community's best interest." "Karen," said Bob, voice trembling but finally firm, "you acted alone. You attacked a university research project with a sledgehammer. You didn't protect the HOA. You detonated it." That's when it hit her. The empire she'd ruled with passive-aggressive emails and color-coded citations was collapsing. The people who once followed her orders about mailbox paint shades were now glaring daggers. "Maybe you should resign," Linda said softly, not meeting her eyes. Resign. The word landed like a meteor.
Karen stormed out, slamming the door so hard the Community Excellence plaque fell off the wall and cracked. The irony was exquisite. Outside, she fumed on her porch, muttering about conspiracies and robot uprisings. But across the street, neighbors were whispering, not about her victory, about her liability. And while Karen was drafting her next defense statement, the university's legal machine was already revving up for something far worse, a formal deposition. Karen thought the HOA would back her up, but she was about to walk into a legal lion's.
If Karma had a soundtrack, this would have opened with a choir of angels singing, "You're about to get roasted." Karen Henderson, former HOA president, self-proclaimed defender of community standards, and part-time robot slayer, had been officially summoned. Her battlefield, not a cul-de-sac, a downtown university legal office where the air itself smelled like mahogany, cold fear, and old money. When she walked in, you could practically hear her confidence trying to crawl out the door. Gone was the iron-fisted suburban general who once patrolled lawns for unauthorized gnomes. In her place stood a woman holding on to a cheap handbag and even cheaper excuses. At the far end of a gleaming mahogany table sat Dr. Hayes, head of robotics, eyes so cold they could have frozen molten lava. Beside her, the university's legal dream team, Mr. Thorne and Ms. Albright, each looking like they'd been born in a courtroom and raised by legal textbooks. Their combined aura screamed, "We bill by the minute and you can't afford this." Karen's lawyer shuffled beside her, Mr. Pringle. Poor man looked like he'd wandered in from a car accident and hadn't realized he was the car. His suit was wrinkled, his expression haunted. He specialized in parking tickets and dog bite disputes, not multi-million-dollar federal property destruction cases. The stenographer adjusted her keyboard. The air was thick enough to butter. "Mrs. Henderson," began Miss Albright, her voice perfectly smooth, "you've stated in your report that the SRU-7 research unit was trespassing. Could you please specify which private property it was on?" Karen blinked. "Well, it was on the sidewalk. That's common property, maintained by the HOA, so technically..." Mr. Thorne leaned forward like a shark who'd smelled blood in a swimming pool. "Technically," he said softly, "that sidewalk is municipal property. Your HOA doesn't own it. You had no legal jurisdiction." Karen's mouth opened, closed, opened again. "Well, it looked suspicious. It was moving without permission." Dr. Hayes' glare could have powered the robot back to life. Mrs. Henderson, that suspicious object was collecting environmental data for a federally funded clean air initiative. The robot you destroyed could have improved air quality for asthma patients, including possibly people in your own neighborhood. The silence that followed was a full 5 seconds of, "You've made a huge mistake." Mr. Pringle coughed nervously. "Perhaps my client didn't fully understand." Mr. Thorne cut him off. "Oh, she understood enough to fetch a sledgehammer." Then came the kicker. Thorne gave a small nod to a technician in the corner. The lights dimmed. A large monitor flickered on. "Mrs. Henderson," Thorne said calmly, "the SRU-7 had onboard cameras. We recovered its final data logs." Karen's face drained of color faster than a wine glass at an HOA banquet. On the screen, grainy footage appeared. Bolt's final moments. Karen advancing, face twisted with fury, yelling, "You infernal machine! You won't be spying on us anymore." Then, the hammer swung. The sound was sickening. The silence afterwards was worse. The clip ended. The lights came up. "Mrs. Henderson," Albright said, her tone clinical, "is that you in the video?" Karen opened her mouth. No words came out. Mr. Pringle leaned in, whispering something that sounded a lot like, "Please stop talking." Then in a strangled voice, he said aloud, "My client will be exercising her right to remain silent." Translation, "We surrender." From there, the lawyers didn't stop. They dissected every claim, every excuse, every attempt to play victim. It was a masterclass in precision legal evisceration. By the end, Karen looked less like an HOA president and more like a deflated pool float. Dr. Hayes sat in quiet triumph, knowing she had just witnessed the academic version of a fatality. When it was all over, Thorne delivered the final blow.
The university will be pursuing full restitution. Preliminary damages exceed $1.2 million, plus punitive compensation. We suggest you prepare accordingly. Karen's voice was a whisper. You can't do this to me. Oh, Thorne said, gathering his notes. We already are. But the nightmare didn't end at the deposition table, because while Karen was busy drowning in legalese, her HOA board was quietly planning her suburban impeachment, and the neighborhood she once ruled, it was about to riot with spreadsheets.
If suburban HOA drama were a sport, Karen Henderson would have been the reigning world champion, until she managed to turn her own team into the opposition. Because the moment word of her robot rampage reached the homeowners, Sunny Meadows Estates went from peaceful suburb to Game of Thrones with golf carts. Let's start with the meeting. Location, the clubhouse, complete with beige walls, stale cookies, and the faint scent of collective regret. Agenda, emergency discussion on recent incident affecting community finances. Translation, Karen, you're toast. As residents trickled in, you could feel the tension vibrating off the folding chairs. People weren't there for neighborhood unity. They were there for blood, or at least a refund on their HOA dues. Karen, in a power blazer that screamed, "Denial!" marched in holding her trusty binder of bylaws like it was the Constitution. She had notes, color-coded tabs, and a speech rehearsed to the syllable. Fellow homeowners, she began, her tone equal parts righteous and delusional. Recent events have been taken out of context. I acted within my authority to protect the community from an unapproved autonomous entity. You mean the $1 million university robot you murdered with a hammer? Interrupted Bob, the treasurer whose voice cracked under the weight of impending bankruptcy. Karen straightened, offended. I neutralized a threat. Linda, from Lot 14, muttered, You neutralized our property values. That's when Bob slapped down a stack of papers so thick it could have doubled as a doorstop. Karen, this is the notice from the university's lawyers. They're not just suing you, they're coming after the HOA. The insurance won't cover deliberate acts of destruction. We're liable for the rest. The room erupted. People who'd once applauded Karen for enforcing mailbox color codes were now shouting over one another. You said it was a toy. Now we're getting sued for science? My husband just canceled our vacation because of you. Even Fifi the infamous poodle barked in agreement, or maybe panic. Hard to tell. Karen raised her hands. Everyone, calm down. This is just fear-mongering. The HOA has reserves. Bob looked like he'd aged 10 years and 10 seconds. The reserves will cover maybe 5% of the damages if we sell the pool furniture and auction off the gazebo. Murmurs turned to shouting. Phones came out. Someone was live streaming to the community Facebook page titled Sunny Meadows, Where Dreams Go to Die. The comments were flooding in faster than the HOA's legal bills. Karen's voice cracked. You're all overreacting. Linda slammed her hand on the table. Karen, you brought a sledgehammer to a robot. This isn't overreacting, it's math. We can't afford you. It was official. The once unquestioned queen of the cul-de-sac was being dethroned by her own subjects. The HOA board called a vote unanimous. Karen was stripped of her presidency, all committee roles, and in the most poetic twist imaginable, her reserved parking spot by the community pool. When the motion passed, Bob said quietly, For the record, this is for Bolt. There was even applause, actual applause. Someone played a ding sound effect from their phone. Karen, stunned, stood in silence as her empire crumbled. For years, she'd wielded bylaws like weapons, fining people for mismatched shutters, unauthorized reefs, and offensively whimsical garden decor. Now, she was the one fined. Fine, she spat, grabbing her binder. You'll regret this when the community falls into chaos. Bob deadpanned. Karen, we already live in chaos. You made sure of that. As she stormed out, slamming the door with all the fury of a dethroned monarch, someone whispered, There goes the HOA Hydra. Outside, her for sale sign wasn't up yet, but fate was already hammering it into the lawn. Because while Karen was still fantasizing about suing back, the university had a new move lined up that would make even the HOA board's rebellion look like child's play. Karen just lost her crown, but next, she was about to lose something even more precious, her control. Because when the university's next legal notice arrived, it didn't come with a warning.
It came with a subpoena.
There are 3 sounds in life you never forget. 1, the crash of your dreams. 2, the click of a lawyer's pen. And 3, the ding-dong of a process server at your door. For Karen Henderson, all 3 arrived right on schedule. Days after losing her HOA crown, the once mighty suburban empress was holed up inside her house, curtains drawn, clutching her phone like it might magically delete her legal problems. The neighborhood, once under her watchful glare, had turned into enemy territory. Kids whispered, neighbors pointed, and even Fifi, the poodle she claimed to be protecting, had developed a nervous tic whenever someone said robot. Then it happened. Ding dong. Karen peeked through the blinds and froze. On her front porch stood a man built like a refrigerator with biceps, dressed in a black windbreaker, holding a thick envelope. He didn't look like a salesman or a delivery guy. He looked like someone who bench-pressed court orders for breakfast. "Mrs. Karen Henderson?" Karen hesitated. "Who's asking?" "The university." Her blood ran cold. With all the ceremony of a royal executioner, the process server handed her a subpoena, a document so thick it probably had its own zip code. "You've been officially summoned. Deposition downtown, Thursday, 10 a.m. Attendance mandatory. Oh, and good luck." As he turned and walked away, Mrs. Henderson's world tilted on its axis. She flipped through the pages, her hands trembling. It wasn't just a summons, it was a detailed financial autopsy of her existence. Every single item Bolt had been made of, every sensor, chip, microprocessor, even the imported German atmospheric scanner, was listed with its value. And the total, a horrifying reality-bending number. $1,200,000, plus penalties, legal fees, and emotional distress of graduate students. Okay, that last part might have been symbolic, but still. By the time she finished reading, Karen's face had achieved a shade of white previously reserved for ghosts and expired yogurt. The next day, gossip exploded like fireworks. Mrs. Henderson next door, the nice one, gave the play-by-play to the community chat. The papers looked official. Blue ribbon, gold seal. She nearly dropped them. I think I heard her mutter, "They can't do this to me." Oh, honey, they can. Meanwhile, over at the university, the lawyers weren't celebrating, they were strategizing. Dr. Hayes, ever the scientist, was methodically documenting every dollar of damage and every hour of lost research. Her tone was calm, her manner clinical, but behind her glasses burned the cold fury of a woman who'd watched years of work turned into scrap metal by a self-righteous suburbanite. "We'll pursue full recovery," she told Mr. Thorne. "No mercy. This isn't just vandalism, it's an attack on science." Back on Primrose Lane, Karen was in full meltdown mode. Her friends had ghosted her, her HOA allies had defected, even Bob the treasurer had stopped returning her emails titled, "Urgent, legal clarification needed." In desperation, she hired a local lawyer, Mr. Pringle, who, up to this point, had spent his career defending grocery store slip-and-fall cases. When she told him the situation, his response was legendary. You hit a university robot with a sledgehammer," Karen nodded solemnly. He blinked twice and said, "And they have video evidence?" Another nod. He removed his glasses, sighed, and said, "Mrs. Henderson, I hope you like the word settlement." The deposition was set, the university was ready, and Karen, well, she was about to discover that protecting the neighborhood doesn't look so noble when it comes with legal fees and compound interest. Because when that subpoena hit her mailbox, it wasn't just paper, it was the sound of karma knocking twice. But the subpoena was just the warm-up, because when Karen finally stepped into that mahogany courtroom downtown, she wasn't facing angry neighbors anymore. She was facing the full weight of academia, science, and cold, merciless logic. Next, fact number 7, the courtroom showdown when Karen met justice.
If karma had a favorite place to hang out, it would be a courtroom with great acoustics. The day of Karen Henderson's deposition arrived like a bad sequel she couldn't escape. Gone were the power walks and clipboards. Today, she looked like a deflated balloon of entitlement. Even her blazer,
once a symbol of HOA dominance, now sagged in quiet defeat. The downtown legal office where the university held depositions wasn't your average law firm. It looked like the set of a high-budget courtroom drama. Marble floors, mahogany panels, and chairs so expensive they could probably file a motion on their own. At the long table sat Dr. Hayes, cool and composed, her posture perfect, her eyes sharper than a titanium drill bit. To her right, Mr. Thorne and Miss Albright, the university's legal hit squad. They weren't here to argue, they were here to obliterate. Karen entered with her lawyer, Mr. Pringle, looking like two civilians accidentally dropped into a war zone. Pringle's face said it all. I'm underqualified and underpaid for whatever this is. The stenographer was already in position, fingers hovering over her keys like a pianist preparing for a concerto in C minor, the C standing for consequences. Thorne began. Mrs. Henderson, he said in a voice smoother than a courtroom latte, do you understand that you're under oath? Karen nodded, barely audible. Good, Thorne continued. Let's begin with your justification for destroying the SRU-7 research unit, also known as BOLT. Karen took a deep breath. It was trespassing. Bylaw 23, Section D, no autonomous devices without HOA approval. I was protecting the community. Albright's eyebrow arched. Protecting it from environmental research? Karen blinked. It was spying. Dr. Hayes leaned forward. Spying? She repeated. Mrs. Henderson, that robot was measuring particulate matter in the air. You know, dust, smog, allergens, not your backyard barbecues. A quiet chuckle rippled across the room, quickly suppressed. Even the stenographer cracked a subtle smile. Karen's lawyer cleared his throat. My client was under the impression that she could override federal research authorization, Thorne interrupted, not even looking at him. Mrs. Henderson, that robot was operating under a Department of Defense-approved grant. You didn't just break a bylaw, you broke federal protection statutes. Karen's mouth opened, then closed again. But it was making noises. Thorne's lips curved into a small, terrifying smile. Yes, that would be the sound of science. And then, just when the humiliation had reached maximum awkwardness, Albright nodded to a technician in the back. Play Exhibit A. The lights dimmed. A screen flickered on. Bolt's final moments played out in haunting, grainy footage. Karen storming towards the robot, eyes blazing with fury, shouting, You infernal machine, you won't spy on us anymore. Then came the swing, the crunch, the silence. The video ended. The lights came back on. Karen sat frozen. Pringle whispered something under his breath that sounded suspiciously like a prayer. Albright folded her hands. Mrs. Henderson, is that you in the footage? I don't recall, Karen stammered. Thorne leaned back. Let the record show the defendant doesn't recall being filmed committing the crime she's denying. Boom. Legal kill shot. Dr. Hayes spoke next, her tone calm but venom-laced. That robot's destruction set our research back over 18 months, destroyed hundreds of hours of environmental data, and endangered future grant funding. Do you have any idea how many people you have affected, Mrs. Henderson? Karen said nothing. She just stared down at her trembling hands. Finally, Thorne gathered his notes. We'll be filing for full restitution, plus punitive damages. Based on the footage and her statements, this qualifies as willful destruction of federally protected property. Translation? She's done. As they adjourned, Dr. Hayes leaned towards Alex, who'd been sitting silently through the entire proceeding. She said, You know, I might name the new robot after her. Alex smiled. Karen bot? Exactly, only this one won't swing first. Karen thought her humiliation had peaked, but the universe wasn't done yet. Because when the insurance company got the deposition transcript, they didn't see a misunderstanding, they saw a financial black hole. Next up, fact number 8. Insurance meltdown, the $1 million domino effect. If karma has lawyers, insurance companies are their accountants. And when the transcript of Karen's deposition landed on the desk of Sunny Meadows Estate's insurer, the reaction was instant. Somewhere, an agent spit out his coffee so violently it probably became evidence. See, on paper, the HOA's policy was simple. It covered property damage, acts of negligence, and reasonable misjudgments by board members. Notice what's not on that list? Intentional destruction of federally funded university robotics. Within hours of the deposition, the insurance company sent what can only be described as a digital scream in the form of an email. Dear Sunny Meadows Estates Board, upon review of recent events and deposition materials, we regret to inform you that your policy does not extend to cover acts of deliberate, malicious, or willful destruction of property, especially property owned by a federally protected institution. Please govern yourselves accordingly. Translation: You're on your own, suckers. Treasurer Bob nearly fainted. The HOA group chat lit up like a dumpster fire during fireworks season. Messages flooded in from panicked homeowners. Can they take my house? Are we going to lose the pool? Wait, what's a federally funded entity? Does that mean NASA's coming? Meanwhile, Karen was pretending everything was fine. She'd started referring to the deposition as a minor misunderstanding. She even posted on the HOA Facebook page. Just to clarify, the university has greatly exaggerated the value of that robot. $1.2 million? Ridiculous. It didn't even have arms. Unfortunately for her, the university's financial breakdown had already gone viral. Every tech publication and academic Twitter thread were sharing headlines like, HOA president destroys $1.2 million robot, claims it was spying on a poodle. The memes? Legendary. Bolt's smoldering frame photoshopped with RIP Wi-Fi Jesus. Karen's sledgehammer edited into Thor's hammer with the caption, wielder of dumb decisions. By the time the insurance executives saw those, they weren't just angry. They were terrified. Because now this wasn't just a lawsuit, it was PR Armageddon. The university's legal team, sensing leverage, sent a polite but deadly follow-up. We note your refusal to indemnify your client. Please be advised that the university intends to seek punitive damages directly against the HOA and its board members, individually and collectively. That phrase, individually and collectively, hit like a nuclear blast. It meant every single homeowner in Sunny Meadows could be personally liable for Karen's robot massacre. The HOA scrambled. They convened another emergency meeting, this time held in total silence except for the sound of Bob's blood pressure monitor beeping in the background. Karen, he said, voice trembling, they're saying we might have to levy every household to pay part of the damages. Karen scoffed. You can't do that. They wouldn't dare. Linda from Lot 14 deadpanned. Karen, they dared. They triple dog dared. The HOA officially declared what they called the Emergency Robotic Incident Levy. Homeowners were billed an extra $2,800 each, non-refundable. Cue outrage. Neighbors who once worshipped Karen for enforcing mailbox symmetry were now showing up at her house like an angry jury. Someone even left a note taped to her mailbox that read, $2,800 for your temper tantrum. You owe me a new vacation. She tried to hold another meeting to explain her side, but no one came, except Fifi, and even the poodle looked ashamed. Meanwhile, the university quietly begins settlement negotiations, but with one caveat. Karen had to be personally named in all damages. The HOA could recover, but she'd be legally radioactive for years. The insurance company, eager to wash their hands of the entire fiasco, agreed to contribute a token amount just to end the PR nightmare, roughly 10% of the demand. The rest, squarely on Karen. So, while the neighborhood reeled from financial shockwaves, Karen found herself at ground zero, bank accounts drained, reputation shredded, and one unforgettable nickname immortalized in HOA folklore, the Sledgehammer Queen of Sunny Meadows.
But if you think Karen's story ends here, you underestimate the power of poetic justice. Because while her reputation burned, the university was already rising from the ashes, building something newer, stronger, and unmistakably Karen-proof.
Revenge may be sweet, but rebuilding with grant money and spite? That's gourmet. After the dust and legal debris settled, Dr. Evelyn Hayes and her university team decided one thing was clear. If Karen Henderson's sledgehammer represented ignorance, then science was going to respond with innovation. Enter Bolt Phoenix. That's right, while Karen was busy fielding calls from her lawyer, her insurance, and one very disappointed poodle groomer, the robotics lab was already designing the next generation of the SRU project. Stronger, smarter, sledgehammer resistant. Dr. Hayes gathered her team in the lab and made the announcement with the calm precision of a woman who'd stared into chaos and decided to out-engineer it. Bolt Phoenix, she declared, will be everything the original was and then some. We're going to make sure no HOA president can ever hurt science again. Her engineers cheered. Alex, the Bolt's creator, just smiled grimly. Can we give it a Karen proximity sensor? He asked. Dr. Hayes didn't even blink. Absolutely. They weren't kidding. Bolt Phoenix's redesign was part scientific marvel, part middle finger to suburban overreach. Its new chassis, a carbon titanium composite that could survive a Category 5 temper tantrum. Its internal drives, triple redundant data cores with encrypted off-site backups. And the piece de resistance, a 150 decibel audio deterrent system. If any individual wielding a blunt object approached within 10 feet, the robot would blast a recording of the university's intellectual property rights charter, followed by Wagnerian opera, loud enough to make eardrums surrender. Alex laughed when he heard it. That'll stop her faster than a restraining order. Meanwhile, the university PR team was turning the tragedy into triumph. Headlines shifted. Robot Reborn, University launches new era of research after HOA incident. Bolt Phoenix takes the streets, reinforced, rebuilt, and ready for anything. It became a symbol, not just of technology, but of resilience. People loved it. Kids wanted to take selfies with it. Engineers wore t-shirts that said, Bolt lives, HOA dies. By the time Bolt Phoenix rolled out for its first test run, Primrose Lane had become a different place. The street was quieter, humbler, and infinitely more self-aware. Neighbors peeked from behind curtains, not in fear, but in awe. The robot glided down the sidewalk, sensors whirring softly, scanning the same air where its predecessor had met its untimely demise. But this time, there was no interference, no shouts, no sledgehammers. In fact, someone, rumor says it was the nice Mrs. Henderson from next door, had left a small bouquet of flowers by Alex's mailbox. A note attached read, For Bolt Phoenix, from the Friends of Scientific Progress and Fifi, who was never scared, just curious. The neighborhood had shifted. Respect had replaced fear. Technology, once seen as an intrusion, was now part of the community fabric. And Karen? Her house was on the market. The for sale by owner sign out front had been updated 3 times, each time slashing the price like her dignity was on clearance. She was rarely seen outside anymore, except for quick, shame-fueled dashes to her car. When she did appear, she avoided eye contact with anyone holding anything remotely metallic. Bolt Phoenix, on the other hand, became something of a local legend. The new model had cameras capable of streaming in 8K and AI algorithms that could recognize patterns of aggressive suburban hostility. Alex joked that it could detect excessive perm solution within a 10-foot radius. And yes, he named the code for that subroutine KarenFilter.v2.0. For Alex and Dr. Hayes, the project's resurrection meant redemption. The data was flowing again, the grants were renewed, and their research was back on track, stronger and smarter than before. Bolt Phoenix had become more than a robot. It was a monument to resilience, a warning to the petty, and a reminder to every HOA in America. Mess with science, and science will upgrade.
But even as Bolt Phoenix rolled proudly through its second life, there was one last act of irony waiting in the wings. Because if there's one thing more satisfying than a comeback, it's the final chapter of HOA Karma, served cold.
Every great story ends with a moral, and this one, it's basically never bring a sledgehammer to a science fight. Months after the chaos on Primrose Lane, Sunny Meadows Estates looked calm again. Almost too calm. The lawns were perfect, the hedges were obediently trimmed, and the HOA newsletter, once Karen's tool of tyranny, now opened with a humble apology titled, "Moving Forward Together, a Community of Learning." Translation, please don't sue us again. Karen Henderson, once the self-crowned queen of suburban order, had vanished from the local gossip circuit. Her reign of clipboard tyranny was officially over, her title revoked, her parking spot reassigned, her reputation mulched beyond recovery. Her house sat quiet, for sale by owner sign gently swaying in the wind, the words price reduced screaming in silent defeat. She rarely appeared in public anymore, except for quick, shame-filled trips to the grocery store, where even the cashier seemed to ring her items slower out of sheer judgment. Meanwhile, Bolt Phoenix had become the neighborhood's favorite celebrity. The once feared robot invader was now treated like a local hero. Children waved when it passed, retirees saluted it from their porches. Fifi, the poodle who allegedly started this whole disaster, had gone viral in a TikTok clip walking calmly beside it, her tiny tail wagging in harmony with the hum of its motors. It was, in a poetic twist of fate, the most wholesome PR redemption arc in academic history. Dr. Hayes and Alex were invited to conferences to present the SRU-7 incident, how adversity sparked innovation. The footage of Bolt's destruction, once gut-wrenching, was now used in lectures about resilience, technology ethics, and the dangers of weaponized ignorance. And yes, in a subtle nod to irony, the university installed a plaque outside the lab that read, "In memory of SRU-7, destroyed by fear, reborn by science." The legend spread. HOA boards across the country started quietly revising their rules, adding new clauses that read suspiciously like, "No interference with autonomous research or technology units under penalty of law." Even Congress got wind of the story. A brief clip of the incident made its way into a subcommittee hearing on the future of robotics. One senator, clearly amused, summed it up perfectly. "If Karen Henderson has taught us anything, it's that ignorance is not a defense, especially when it's holding a sledgehammer." But perhaps the most poetic moment came months later when Bolt Phoenix rolled once again down Primrose Lane. The same stretch of sidewalk, the same sunlight glinting off its carbon titanium shell, the same air humming with quiet expectation. It paused in front of Karen's old house, still unsold, and scanned the area. Its sensors whirred softly, performing an atmospheric analysis with flawless precision. Then, just for a moment, it emitted a brief tone, half beep, half sigh, almost like it remembered. Alex, watching from his porch, smiled. "You did it, buddy. You survived." He turned back toward the house, where Dr. Hayes was already planning the next grant application, this one titled Resilience in Autonomous Urban Robotics, a subtle nod to the incident that started it all. Back in the cul-de-sac, the neighbors chatted about Bolt Phoenix like it was a local myth. Kids whispered about the robot that defeated Karen. Adults joked that the HOA should install a bronze statue of it by the community pool. And every time someone new moved in, the story was retold. Half cautionary tale, half comedy legend. See that street? That's where a lady once attacked a $1 million robot with a hammer. 2 minutes later, she was served papers by university lawyers in suits so sharp, they probably came with warning labels. The HOA learned its lesson. The community learned humility. And Karen Henderson? Well, she learned what happens when self-righteousness meets science. Because, in the end, the robots didn't take over the world. They just took back the sidewalk. So, next time your HOA threatens to fine you for leaving your trash can out too long, just remember, at least you didn't start a war with a $1 million robot. If you enjoyed watching this wild saga of suburban justice, hit that like button, subscribe for more HOA wars, and drop a comment with your favorite Karen moment. Because in this neighborhood, the drama never sleeps. It just gets upgraded to 8K.